Have you ever wondered why a perfectly clean feeder, fresh water, and the right seeds still aren't enough to convince birds to stay? The answer may be simpler and more fascinating than most people realize. Before birds truly accept a backyard, they seem to watch, wait, and quietly gather clues about whether it's a place they can trust. Understanding those subtle behaviors can completely change the way you see every visit to your yard. A few years ago, after a strong storm passed through my neighborhood, I noticed something I couldn't stop thinking about. My feeders were still full. The bird bath was clean. The yard looked almost exactly as it had before. Yet for several mornings, the birds didn't return the way they usually did. They landed on distant branches and fence posts, almost as if they were carefully studying everything before coming any closer. That quiet observation taught me a lesson I've carried ever since. Birds aren't only searching for food, they're searching for confidence. Today, I'd like to share what years of patiently watching these small visitors have taught me about the quiet test they seem to perform before deciding that a yard is truly safe. By the end of this video, you'll probably start noticing signs that have been happening right in front of you all along. If you enjoy learning about the remarkable lives of backyard birds, I'd be honored to have you subscribe and join me for more quiet mornings like this. I'm Walter Hayes, and I've spent countless mornings simply sitting with a cup of coffee, watching birds teach lessons that only patience can reveal. Before we continue, a quick note. The ideas you'll hear today combine observations, practical bird-friendly habits, and thoughtful interpretations of bird behavior. They're shared for educational and entertainment purposes, with deep respect for both nature and the curiosity it inspires. When I began paying closer attention to those quiet moments after the storm, I realized something had changed. Not in my yard, but in the way I was looking at it. Instead of asking, "Why aren't the birds coming down?" I started asking a different question. What might they be seeing that I haven't noticed? That simple shift made all the difference. Imagine arriving somewhere you've never been before. Even if the place looks beautiful, you're unlikely to relax the moment you step inside. Most of us instinctively slow down. We notice unfamiliar sounds, watch the people around us, look for exits, and quietly decide whether we feel comfortable enough to stay. It's a natural response, one that has helped living creatures survive for countless generations. Sometimes I wonder why we expect nature to behave any differently. Over the years, I've come to believe that birds may approach a new backyard in much the same spirit, not because they're overthinking, but because caution is woven into the lives of wild animals. Before committing to a place, they often pause, observe from a nearby branch, and seem to gather quiet clues about what kind of environment they're entering. To me, that's a gentle reminder that we're all part of a much larger living system. Humans and wildlife experience the world in different ways, of course. Yet every now and then we recognize familiar patterns. The need to feel safe before letting our guard down may be one of those shared threads that connects us more deeply to the natural world than we sometimes realize. As I continued watching the birds outside my own window, I noticed that their first visits followed a quiet pattern. Rarely did they fly straight to the feeder. More often, they stopped somewhere nearby first, remaining still for a few moments. Those pauses didn't feel random. They felt meaningful. And once I started noticing them, I realized they were telling a story that many backyard bird lovers unknowingly overlook. If there's one thing these years have taught me, it's that trust is rarely built through a single grand gesture. It's built through small moments that repeat so consistently they begin to feel dependable. That's exactly what I started noticing in my own backyard. The birds that eventually became regular visitors weren't always the boldest ones. In fact, many of them spent days, or sometimes weeks, keeping their distance. They would perch in the same maple tree, visit the fence for a few seconds, or simply watch while another bird ventured closer first. Little by little, those brief visits became longer ones. The feeder was the same. The water hadn't changed. What changed was their confidence. Looking back, I realized I wasn't attracting birds nearly as much as I was earning their trust. That understanding transformed the way I cared for my yard. I stopped wondering what new gadget or special seed I needed to buy, and started paying closer attention to the environment itself. Was there nearby shelter? Were there sudden disturbances every morning? Did the feeding area allow birds to scan for danger before landing? Those questions proved far more valuable than searching for quick fixes. One morning, I watched a small chickadee land on a branch overlooking the feeder. It stayed there quietly for what felt like several minutes before finally flying down. It picked up a single seed and returned to the branch instead of eating at the feeder. A few days later, it stayed longer. Before long, it was joined by others. That simple sequence reminded me that confidence isn't demanded, it grows. Perhaps that's why these little visitors have so much to teach us. They remind us that patience isn't wasted time. Consistency has its own quiet language. Safety is something that's felt long before it's understood. And maybe that's true not only for birds, but for many of the most meaningful relationships we experience throughout life. If you'd like to recreate the same kind of welcoming environment I've spent decades refining, that's exactly why I put together the Backyard Bird Trust Guide. Inside, I've gathered the practical lessons that took me years to discover, from choosing the best locations for feeders and water, to avoiding the subtle mistakes that often keep birds from returning. I also included my Backyard Bird Observation Journal, a 30-day Backyard Trust Challenge, a guide to common mistakes and their fixes, and a collection of the backyard products I've personally found most reliable over the years. My hope is simply to help you build a place where birds choose to return, one peaceful morning at a time. And there's one particular behavior that almost every trusting bird eventually displays. Once you recognize it, you'll never watch your backyard the same way again. As I sit here thinking about all the mornings I've spent watching birds come and go, I don't believe the greatest reward has ever been seeing a rare visitor land in my yard. The greatest reward has been realizing that trust can never be rushed. Every bird that chooses to return reminds me that the most meaningful things in nature happen quietly. They aren't forced. They aren't hurried. They grow little by little until one day, what once seemed uncertain becomes familiar. Perhaps that's one of the reasons so many of us find peace in watching backyard birds, especially as the years go by. We begin to recognize that the natural world still follows rhythms that our busy lives often encourage us to forget. Patience still matters. Consistency still matters. Kindness toward living things still matters. Maybe that's why I believe birds have as much to teach us as we have to learn about them. When a wild bird decides your backyard is a safe place, it isn't simply accepting the food you've offered. In its own quiet way, it's responding to the environment you've created through care, respect, and steady attention. I find that thought deeply comforting, because it reminds me that trust, whether in nature or in life, is usually earned through countless small actions that no one else notices. So tomorrow morning, before you refill a feeder or freshen the bird bath, take a few quiet moments to simply watch. Listen to the sounds around you. Notice where the birds pause before they land. You may discover that they're telling a story that words could never fully explain. Thank you for sharing this peaceful moment with me. Until next time, I hope your backyard becomes not just a place where birds visit, but a place where they truly feel at home. And perhaps, in helping them find that sense of safety, you'll find a little more of it yourself.